Welcome to another episode in our podcast series. I love this because I get to speak to incredible people from around the globe, really. People who are leaders at the very top end of the game. People who understand the power of emotional intelligence and leadership, the benefits that can bring for both the human beings in your organizations, but also the performance and the culture of your organizations. I'm connected to so many incredible people, and I'm always looking around thinking, hey, do you know what? I could have a really good conversation with this person. And the next person, today's guest, is Sarah Loates. Sarah and I have met before. We've had a very inspired conversation. Now, this is slightly different. Why? Because Sarah runs an HR consultancy and she runs a management training consultancy. This has been going on for about just under 11 years. You've got a strong background in HR with companies like Eon, companies like Cooper Parry, the accountancy firm, which, by the way, I've visited, and it's an incredible place to work. It's just so colorful. The meeting rooms, which look like something from Alice in Wonderland, sleeping pods, everything. It's just an incredible place. So Sarah, I reached out to Sarah because I know that she gets the importance of culture. She gets the importance of human-centered leadership. So Sarah, thank you so much for taking time out of your very, very busy day. I know how strapped you are, but I really appreciate you being here today with us. How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you, Kul, and thank you for asking me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, I have been looking forward to this one. I know I've tried to pin you down for a while now for a date, and we finally got there. Yeah. But listen, Sarah, I saw a post recently, a few weeks back, where you were talking about the importance of leadership in terms of the staff that you manage and the culture that you try to create within your very fast growing HR consultancy firm. Do you want to just talk about the ethos and the values that drive the culture of your organization?
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you always think about culture and you think about large corporate organizations. I run what is in essence a micro business. So we have 6 employees. So we're a small business with a relatively modest turnover. But like you say, we've been going 11 years. And I think when I was making that post on LinkedIn, I was kind of reflecting on not only our journey over the previous 2 years, which has obviously been quite a challenge in terms of the pandemic, because we saw 40% of our turnover just evaporate overnight. That's the training side of the business. And we were reflecting on basically what had culminated in a really positive set of financial results for the business. So we had our best month since we were incorporated. We had our best quarter since we were incorporated. And every single member of my team did a personal best in terms of fee earning, which is kind of like a massive triple. So naturally we were delighted, but I was kind of reflecting on, well, what got us here? What got us to this point, particularly after all this time, because we were kind of poised to do this sort of in January 2020. We'd just moved to new offices. We'd recruited a management trainer in January 2020. So not a great time to recruit a member of staff for training just before the pandemic. We've made lots of investment in terms of our systems, our processes. So I was reflecting on that, and I think it does come back. It just comes down to the culture that you create within an organization and the people that you employ within that business, because any business is nothing without its people. And whether that's people because they are the customer facing element, or the people that are paying attention or providing that extra level of detail because they manufacture something. And you mentioned values there. We do have a set of values, and I was reflecting on this as well, because we don't actually, you won't find them on our website. They're not on a wall in our offices, but we do talk about them all the time. And certainly when we recruit, it's one of the first things that we send to individuals is we send them our values, and basically we do a values-based interview as part of our selection process. So our values, so they are genuine, they are respect, they are relationships, resourceful, accountable, and fun and friendly. So they are kind of perhaps, I mean, the team co-developed them probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, when we had an away day, and we had a team away day off site, and we literally did it right at the end of the day, and it didn't take us that long to do, which is interesting. But I think that if you've recruited people who get what you are about in terms of your purpose, then it shouldn't be difficult to articulate which of the things are important.
I mean, there's so much to unpick there, Sarah. You were saying things, I was like picking up thinking, oh, I must talk about that, I must talk about that. There is so much that resonates with me right there. I mean, we could do the whole podcast just about that, to be quite honest. You see, I go into organizations and I very often teach values to senior leadership teams. I'm doing some work with a group of postgraduate psychologists who are aspiring to become doctors or psychologists, and I'm talking about values there, and they're like mind blown. But actually what I'm talking about is not so complex. And what I love about what you just said is you simplified values. And you're so right. I'm so pleased that you said it's not on our website, it's not on a poster on the wall, because there are so many times, Sarah, that I've gone into a training room with very senior leaders around the table, and I say, okay, let's talk about values. So what are your values? And inevitably what happens is somebody in the room will look at a wall, point at a poster and say, that's my values. And I'll say, no, they're not. They're not your values. They're the values of your organization. They're borrowed values. Your values need to align with those values, but you have your own values as a human being. And then they look at me really confused. And then when you said that it didn't take us long to come up with these values, by the way, I love your values. And it shouldn't take long, because in the recruitment process into any organization, one of the things that I say is stop looking at the technical skills and look at the emotional intelligence skills. Look at the value sets that the people bring into your organization. If they align with your organizational values, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. And I think that's the philosophy that you seem to have approached, and it's worked well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I get what you're saying in terms of technical, and of course there will always be a certain benchmark, particularly with HR and, you know, all of that side of things. But we kind of only use that as almost like an initial sift.
Like an essential criteria kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the thing that we actually spend most time on is the values-based interviews. And interestingly, I did make a poor recruitment choice during my time of running my business. And the time that I realized I'd made a poor, I mean, this person was technically outstanding. They were brilliant. But the time that I realised that I'd made a poor recruitment decision was when I observed her interacting with our cleaner back in our offices. Now, Deborah's still with us. You know, she cleans my home. She's worked with me for years, and I regard her as part of the team. You know, even though, you know, she's a self-employed person in her own right. And I remember walking into this office and I observed the way that the person not only looked at her, but spoke to her in a very dismissive manner. And it was at that point that I thought, you don't fit my business. Yeah. So we now put that front and centre. And sometimes, I mean, we have been known, I mean, I'm not a fan of, you know, in terms of selection, I don't sort of interview lots and lots of people. We'll probably only interview maybe 2 or 3. And our values-based interview, it's been known to go to about 2 to 3 hours. And then what we do after we've done the values-based interview, we invite them back in and we put them in a meeting room with the rest of the team. And we say, ask the team anything. Ask them what it's like to work here. Ask them anything that you want to ask. The challenge with that is we did have one particular team member and she did give them a right grilling, which wasn't quite I mean, she was only naturally curious. She's a lovely person, but, you know, it's meant to be more of getting a feel for the business, you know, for the team.
I did some work with a GP surgery that was really, really struggling. They had massively high turnover, couldn't retain their staff. They seemed to recruit staff into the organization that caused problems for them. The doctor was getting ill himself as a result of that. And so they were on the cusp of, right, we need to completely refresh our staff. And I says, well, what we need to do, in accordance with the old quote, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. We need to do something differently. So what we did, we built into their recruitment process. I says, okay, allow me to get every single candidate to fill in two forms, two questionnaires. One is for their behavioral preferences to see what their communication style is like, and one to do an EQ profile, an emotional intelligence profile, to see where they sit in terms of the emotional intelligence. And we work with 26 competency areas. So even if their EQ is low, we can identify which of those 26 competencies it's low on. So we can maybe build those up. And, a month later, they've just said, the people that they've recruited are some of the best that they've ever had, highly professional, really engaged, and they drive with a sense of values. And I think that's it. And I think so many organizations, big and small, particularly the large ones, still follow a very archaic way of recruiting, very technical, very, very sort of a bureaucratic process that they simply follow. And I was talking to a university that at a point where they want to review the way they recruit people, and they want to follow the whole values-based approach. And I think the way you do it is just brilliant. We need to patent that and sell that. That needs to be part of up front and center with your management training.
Well, we do have, as part of the technical, we do a desktop exercise where we put them in a room with a laptop, and then, all these hypothetical emails pop up, and they have an hour, and there we're testing sort of prioritization, interacting with colleagues, but also their technical advice. So once they've sort of passed that, like I say, the values bit is the key part. But it's interesting as well, though, because I was reflecting on this before our conversation today, and we also use our values in terms of making small and big business decisions. So obviously, when we came into the pandemic, you would think as a HR business we were rushed off our feet. But actually, a lot of our clients, furloughed a lot of their staff and didn't require HR support. So, we had some difficult decisions to make in terms of the business at that point. But it also even guides small decisions. So we've actually parted company. I mean, we are lucky to have got to this point, I guess, but we've parted company with clients before that we don't feel match our values in terms of how they behave. And I was particularly proud, sounds proud, is that the right word? When one of my team members approached me and she said, Sarah, I think we need to part company with this particular client. And I asked her why and what the rationale was. And the rationale, she said, they don't align with our values. That was it. And she gave me the example why. And I said, well, okay, are you prepared to give that message and to handle that with the client? And she said, yes, I am. And I said, well, then I'm prepared to back you up if they then ask to talk to me. And I think that in some respects, values kind of become a language within an organisation where, because they're so non-judgmental, you're not saying that you are this or you are that. You're just saying, we ask questions, I mean, we had silly things like we sent Christmas cards out, and we sent about 200 of these cards out, and I got all the team to sign their name themselves. Now, most businesses, they'll get it printed or whatever, but I said, and one of the team members at the time, she was saying, I can't believe you're making me sign all these cards. This is, there's such a waste of time. And I said, well, actually, if you think about our values, and one of them is genuine relationships, I said, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we actually take the time just to sign our names ourselves? I mean, that's probably a silly example.
No, I don't think it is at all. I think it's a really good example,
But it's just how it can permeate the business in terms of both the big and the small decisions.
Absolutely. We're making small decisions all the time, but sometimes we actually give more headspace to the bigger decisions, and sometimes that's the right thing to do. But when we get to that unconscious state where values sit at the very heart of every single decision that we make, then we know that we're truly living those values. And that's what I do. And I, like you, have sacked clients before because I've seen behavior within the organizations or within the senior leadership teams that simply don't align with my values. My litmus test is this, Sarah: can I sleep at night It's as simple as that. Can I sleep at night knowing that I am working with the right people, doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason?
Yeah, it's very challenging as a HR professional. I mean, I've heard some horror stories from, HR colleagues where they've been, asked to do, just unethical stuff. And, it's difficult when you're an individual and that's your job and your salary and your mortgage and so on and so forth. But there comes a time, I mean, my litmus test is the same as yours. It's, can I look myself in the mirror and say, I did everything I possibly could to, do the right thing here. But, ultimately businesses do have to make difficult decisions, but they don't have to do it in such a way where they just completely chuck all of their values. They're dealing with a person at the end of the day. You think about the P&O scenario and basically they made a commercial decision, but, completely underestimated the fact that they were dealing with a loyal workforce that had given them many years service that they basically thought they could just pay off.
It was just an incredulous decision, for any right thinking person. You think, why would any organization do that? You work with so many organizations. What would you say? Very often you get called in when things aren't going well. You'll have a retention service where you do the day-to-day, but there are going to be times when you get called in when things aren't going very well, when organizations perhaps haven't done what they could have done to alleviate the problem, to prevent the problem even. What are the sort of key things that you've seen in either organizational cultures or leadership styles that have perhaps led to problems that didn't need to be there?
Sometimes it's a number of factors. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with owner-managed businesses, the owner is the owner, and obviously how they show up and how they behave and their attitude and all of that can create sometimes an undesirable culture. But it just boils down to, at the end of the day, that you are dealing with people, and in some respects, you might be a round peg in a square hole in an organisation where maybe you just don't fit anymore, or something's changed, or so in some respects it can be the right thing for somebody, that the fact that they do move to a new organisation. But yeah, I mean, we see a lot of employee relations challenges, but my view on things is, if something's reached the point of a formal grievance, there are no winners from that process. Everyone's a loser. In fact, I take the view that pretty much everything's failed if it gets to the point that somebody's raising a formal grievance. Personally, I'm a big fan, where possible, to actually either nip an issue in the bud through a sensible conversation, or if you need something more formal, to utilise a mediation approach to try and resolve that conflict, because it can destroy an organisation, particularly small businesses.
But don't you find, Sarah, sometimes, and I don't know, I've seen this happening in large business. I've seen it happening in the police service. I was there for 30 years. And there are times when we all know that the right approach, the best approach would be like this mediative kind of approach, conversation, a sensible conversation. But then people become entrenched in their positions. Either the organization becomes entrenched, or people within the organization, or the individual in question becomes entrenched. How do you overcome that?
I see that in terms of grievances. I think that grievances entrench positions, because it becomes very them and us, or mediation, I suppose, less so, because you've got two parties or two or more parties in conflict, and the role of the mediator is to get them to come to the solution and facilitate that. So often that means that entrenched positions, and we talk a lot about positions and interests as part of mediation, what position are they adopting to satisfy which interest, and it's about kind of uncovering that. But ultimately, there are various mechanisms that can be utilised in terms of, if two individuals, particularly at a senior level within an organisation, aren't getting along, then there are various mechanisms which could be undertaken in terms of exiting individuals from an organisation.
In a way that doesn't necessarily end up in World War III necessarily.
A piece of legislation was introduced around something called protected conversations. Can't remember now. It was probably about 7 or 8 years ago now. And that was really to sort of fast track conversations around, concerns around performance management or whatever, and essentially moving people on. But I almost say doing it in a manner that is respectful, because yes, you can put somebody through capability processes, and of course, most people will revert to that to start off with. But ultimately, a sensible conversation about an amicable parting of the ways might be the best thing for both individuals concerned, but also the organisation and also the people within it, because of course they're also being impacted by whatever's happening in terms of certain individuals.
See, Sarah, I'm listening to you as an HR professional, listening to what you're saying, and can I just say that you're probably one of the first HR professionals who have actually ever said this. Most times that I've had an issue where I've needed to resolve an issue within the workplace with one of my members of staff, the first piece of advice that you get from HR professional is unsatisfactory performance processes or unsatisfactory absence management processes. So they take you down a process as opposed to what you're talking about, human conversations and this wider view, this wider spatial awareness of what's going on. And I think for me, that's what's missing. That is what's missing in the HR remit. So how do you think that we could improve HR both within organizations, as HR professionals, as somebody who's CIPD or whatever? What is a thing that could improve the name that HR has got? Because very often people refer it as human resistance. What is it that we need to do as professionals to move forward?
Oh, human remains, that's another one.
Oh, I've never heard that one. Human remains.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because your experiences will have been, predominantly with the police service, and of course, you will have had things that had been agreed with your unions in terms of processes to follow. So it will have been quite prescriptive. I suppose I'm talking more in a context of, maybe smaller businesses, SMEs, things of that nature. So how can we move it on? Well, actually, it just comes back to what you've been talking about, which is about creating the right culture, having the right leaders, and recruiting the right people in the first place with the right skills. Put them in the right role. It's really not rocket science. Understand what drives them, what motivates them, why they get up in the morning. Articulate what the purpose of the organisation is. Give them autonomy. Give them the tools they need to do the job. It's kind of basic, but it can happen within small businesses as well as larger organisations. And you talked about sort of some of the HR horrors that we've dealt with, and I sort of swerve that one in terms of going into too much detail. But yes, we've dealt with a lot. But as I say, I often take the view that when it's got to that point, kind of everyone's failed. And I'm very much more at the other end of things about helping organisations not get to that point in the first place. So often we take a lot of our clients on a journey where, yes, we are initially involved with them because something unpleasant has happened, or something needs dealing with, but then we often sort of unpick why that is, put the basics in place like the compliance and the policies that you referred to. But then the more forward-thinking clients, then we'll sort of take them on this cultural journey where they actually start thinking about, well, what is our purpose? How do we engage our people? What do we stand for? What's important to us? Do we have a really clear idea of who we want to recruit? Because again, a lot of businesses sort of think, oh, interviewing is so easy. But actually it is, but only if you have a really clear idea of what it is that you're looking for. And often businesses have kind of missed that bit. So they, so sort of that person organisation fit that we talk about in terms of culture is just not there. And sometimes I think also they have to be brave and sometimes run with an empty slot on the shift as opposed to just recruit a bum on a seat. And I often sort of say, are you recruiting the person or a person? If it's the person, great. If it's a person, just move on, because they're just going to cause you problems further down the line because they don't fit your culture.
Again, a lot of wisdom in that. And I'm just working with a healthcare provider at the moment, Sarah, and we're just running a cultural audit across 1,400 staff. And the thing about this healthcare provider, they are a small organisation, relatively speaking, within healthcare. They're a very caring organisation, but when you hear stuff coming back from the staff, it's quite compelling in the frustrations that they're vocalising. And I think the solutions to some of these are so simple and so easy. But sometimes we get lost in the mire of all the stuff that's going on, and it's very easy to lose focus of your people, particularly, and let's face it, healthcare for the last 2 years in particular have been under the cosh, and they still are to some degree. So it's very easy to lose sight of the really important stuff around your culture and stuff like that. While ever you're still a caring organisation, it's easy to make mistakes, isn't it? And I feel that one of the things that we miss as organizations sometimes is those human conversations that we need to have, as well as getting the work done. It's the human conversations that we need to have with each other. It's a form of checking in. It's a form of knowing that we've got the right people working for us, with us. I love that when you said, are you hiring the person or a person? And it's such a subtle difference, isn't it? It's such a subtle nuance, but so powerful in the outcomes that you get from that.
Yeah, and it is also difficult, particularly in the current context where we've just breached 1.4 million vacancies, I think, and people are running short in terms of shifts. But interestingly, I mean, to go back to your thing about the cultural audit and some of the sort of niggles that are coming through, again, I'm a big fan of, well, ask the people that do the job, because they generally have the best answers. And I did something with a client the other week, and they've got a great culture, and they rolled their values out 3 or 4 years ago, and they're really flying now. And we got all of their operators together, so it's a manufacturing business, to talk about the best ways to structure the shifts. Now, a lot of organisations, that would be quite a contentious discussion.
Goodness, I tried to do that in the police service in one of the departments. One of the worst things I ever did.
Well, particularly when you're talking about 2 shift, 3 shift, and so on. But basically, how I did it is it was a conversation, with sort of 16 operators. And I sort of said, look, this is what the business is trying to achieve in terms of its objectives. So flexibility, obviously with the energy costs going through the roof, looking at how they could manage those, but all sorts of other things were on their wish list. And, basically sort of said, we asked them what was important to them and what they most valued about working there. And that was really interesting, some of the things that came out from that. And then we said, okay, so how could the shifts be structured in order to meet these business goals, but also meet the goals of what you want? Because top of their list was, flexibility and spending time with their families and things like that. And it's that sort of pluralist approach where the organisation and the employees within it, they've kind of all got the same goal at the end of the day, which is for that business to continue in business in order to provide employment to people. But it's when you can actually leverage that so that the organisation and the people within it work jointly, like they sort of co-create things. So, and again, that isn't just in corporates, that can happen in SMEs up and down UK PLC.
Oh, 100%. And to some degree, I think it can be more powerful in SMEs because you have a smaller group of people, and much like your organisation, a small group of people, but they're so coalesced around these values and what Loates HR Consultancy is all about.
Yeah, why are you here? What's the purpose? And I think about our purpose as a business, and it's very clear. I'm sort of like, well, we're here to serve the community, that we operate the business in. So we're a big part of the community, and we get involved in lots of different stuff. But I'm here to provide employment to the people of Derby and Derbyshire. So I'm very proud to be an employer. But also, the key for me is our purpose is basically to alleviate the stress related to employment matters for both the employer and the employee, because, that isn't conducive for anybody. So, we're a sort of intervention, if that makes sense.
No, I love it. I love it. And just as a final thing, really, all the stuff that we've been talking about, reminds me of the changing environment in which we exist. One thing that's come up really strong, and you've talked about 1.4 million vacancies just in the UK. I'm reminded of this whole concept of the Great Resignation, how now people are above the monetary recompense that they get for working. They're actually valuing their safety, the environment, whether they feel appreciated, heard, valued, seen, all of these kind of things. For me, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've all gone back down to the very basic of the human needs, and we've recalibrated since the pandemic started. So it's about understanding where human beings are right now. And if we value our employees to that degree, they can be incredible employees going forward.
I often talk, I can't remember how old it is now. I think it's 1954, but Hertzberg and the two-factor theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I often say to employers, you need to get the basics right, first of all. So, you talk about the Great Resignation. It is all about retention at the moment. And it's not about, I sort of say, if you're doing an exit interview, you've also failed because, and there's this concept now of stay interviews, which is just simply actually a conversation where you understand what is important to that person, because everyone has different things that are important to them. And then it's your role as a leader to try and sort of provide that to them. So I'm a big fan of, get all the basics right in terms of the pay, the working environment. One of them is policies, but I'm as you gathered, I'm not really a policy person. But I suppose I think about my team, and I talked to them about what was important to them. And one of my team said, "Oh well, I have to use a lot of my annual leave to care for my daughter." So, the week before last, we decided to give everybody 3 days extra annual leave. And that really meant a lot to her, because she said that means now I just get the odd day here and there for me, as opposed that I have to use it. She's a single mother, that I have to use it to care for my daughter. So it's things like that you get the basics right, and then you get the motivators in terms of the recognition, the autonomy.
The basics are like your foundation. Get your foundation in place. And some of those aren't the most exciting, are they? Policies. Let's be honest. Policies are like one of the most boring things, and constrictive. If we overdo the policy, they can really constrict you as well, can't they? But you need to get those basics right. But then after that, it's about those human conversations that you talked about.
Yeah, development, recognition, autonomy. The work itself, and I'm a big fan in terms of recognition, and I will put forward my team members for various awards, or you'll always find me probably talking about them on LinkedIn, and so that's a form of recognition. Even down to the point where our phones, so we have a phone system, and when you log off at the end of the week, it says to you, "Yay, it's Friday, great job," or "Thanks for your hard work this week," or something. I don't know, I know that's silly, but or handwritten notes, it doesn't have to just be about pay.
Well, listen, Sarah, I've really enjoyed talking to you, and you've reminded me that I promised you I was going to come and visit you, but now you've inspired me to come to visit you. I'm going to take some time out.
We're at a World Heritage Site, so it's glorious today. I've been playing tennis this morning on Darley Park. So yeah, it's living the dream down here for in terms of well-being. So
it is. You're in a lovely part of the world. I will definitely come and visit you. I want to go and meet all your staff now. You've inspired me to meet all your staff.
Always have an open invitation, Kul.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much for taking time out to join me today. I'm going to let you get back to your very, very busy life, and maybe another round of tennis or something like that. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Take care.